What's going on, y'all? My name is Tommy. Well, welcome back to the channel. Today on Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit, part 2 of what's going to be a 3-part series, because otherwise I'd be doing research for like my entire week and then spitting out a very long video. Siege engines, ballistas, catapults, anything in between. Today, how we make them work in Pathfinder 1st Edition. Remember, if you're liking what you're seeing, to like, subscribe, and ding the bell. Stay caught up on all your stuff. For now, let's dive in. Okie doke. So, siege engines, a trope as old as time in fantasy settings. Everything from all of the kids who are still playing Total War as adults. One of the very first PC games I ever owned was Shogun Total War, the original Shogun Total War, and I kind of just stuck ever since. To those of us who read a lot of history books and know a lot of things about a lot of sieges and how a lot of walls were taken down to the armchair engineers and back again, they're a huge part of fantasy, and in Pathfinder 1st Edition, they exist in a myriad number of forms, some of them very clunky, almost all of them really hard to use in a normal play setting. Turns out it's really hard to drag your trebuchet down a 5-foot staircase. But before we talk about that, we should talk about the mechanics of them, because they are many. For the sake of this video, we will not be talking about things like battering rams or siege towers, though you could probably do some real weird shenanigans with a battering ram. Siege engines are, as you might guess, exotic weapons. They generally need to be broken down and reassembled on the battlefield before use, which takes a considerable amount of time, and fall in, for our purposes, either direct fire or indirect fire weapons. A direct fire weapon functions very much the same as an attack roll with a crossbow. Really, what is a ballista if not a dire crossbow? A direct fire weapon takes a -2 penalty on its attack roll for the size category differences, barring the knowledge engineering will of course have, because sacred geometry. Indirect fire siege weapons, think your catapults, trebuchets, and such, launch in an arc, are much harder to aim accurately but can fire over like walls and things. To fire one, the crew leader of a given siege unit would make a targeting check against the DC of the siege engine they're trying to fire, BAB plus ranks in engineering. There are several modifiers that play with this, and you target a square. Should you miss, you roll a d8, sort of like the world's biggest splash weapon, to see where the gigantic fuck-off rock you're throwing through the air ends up landing. All siege engines have a minimum crew required to man them without penalty, a number of consecutive full round actions that medium creatures must use in order to load them. Smaller creatures take a little longer because picking up big fuck-off crossbow bolts, and larger creatures can do it a little faster. So that's a lot, right? Looking at the raw data, the first assumption, if you wanted to play a character who's rolling around with a battle ballista, you would need a bunch of friends, you would need the entire party to be in on the gimmick, and even then, the smallest siege engine is large, the fun ones are considerably larger, and such might not necessarily fit in most encounter spaces unless you're gonna knock a hole through the wall, in which case all bets are off. How do we get around this? Yeah, you guessed it, magic, and today we will be building on the shell of the siege mage. Without a doubt, my most favoritist of all wizard archetypes, if not the most shiniest of them in most levels of play, because I really enjoy hucking giant rocks at things, I guess. A siege mage replaces scribe scroll with the siege engineer feat as a bonus feat, without prereqs. The feat auto-locks you into proficiency with all siege weapons, and when you are the crew lead for a siege engine, you don't generate mishaps, which is why we're not even talking about mishaps. We have it right out the gate. The siege mage does not get an arcane bond, but instead bonds with a siege engine. They can use that bond to aim and fire the siege engine remotely, as long as they are within 30 feet, though you still need a crew to reload the thing. At level 10, you can reload, aim, and fire the siege engine purely mentally. You no longer need a crew to control the siege engine, but it still takes the normal amount of time and actions to load the engine in question. A siege mage may also sacrifice one of their spells to empower their giant rock ballista bolt cannonball or cow that is diseased, which is going over the wall, by using a swift action. So the next attack they make before the end of their turn gets a bonus on its attack roll or the targeting roll equal to the level of the sacrificed spell, and a bonus to damage equal to 3 times the level of the spell. There are already several dice on the end of very many large siege engines, so this is real scary. So scary, in fact, that we don't get cantrips, and the siege mage has not 1, not 2, but 3 opposition schools. It's a lot, but the trade-off is you become a very aggressive damage powerhouse. How do we do that? Well, let's talk about our key spells. First, the bread and butter, most important spell you can stack on a siege mage, Unseen Servant. As I'm sure we all are aware, Unseen Servant makes a mindless, invisible, shapeless thing that performs simple tasks, which it repeats ad nauseum as long as you remain within range. It can't attack, it can't be killed, but it can feasibly reload a siege engine. Maybe not all of them, at least not by itself. Multiple castings of Unseen Servant realistically should be able to repeat the action of load a cannonball, which, say on the Fiend's Mouth cannon, weighs 30 pounds and is too much for one, but if mindless things are told to team lift, should be good. That cannonball costs 45 gold. 45 GP per shot is a significant amount of money spent. We'll get around this with Abundant Ammunition, a spell when cast upon a container that contains non-magical ammunition or shuriken. It's weird that shuriken is a distinction here, but whatever, it's fine. At the start of each round, the spell replaces any ammunition taken from the container the round before. The ammunition taken from the container the round before vanishes if after casting the spell you cast a spell that enhances projectiles, think greater magic weapon, yes please, on the same container. All projectiles this spell conjures are affected by this spell. Repeated castings of level 1 spells, which we can get extra value out of with our sacred geometry, arithmancy shenanigans. We've gotten around the cost of ammunition, we've gotten around how to have our trebuchet and load it too without making the fighter do it, and we've kept our damage on par. The only remaining factor, how do we move this thing around efficiently in tight spaces? Easiest answer to that comes from a level 3 spell, Shrink Item. This will shrink a non-magical item. Remember, we're not enchanting our siege weapons, we're enchanting the ammo, Lamau got 'em, to 1/16 of its normal size in each dimension, which reduces the size of the thing by 4 categories. That means a large siege engine then becomes tiny. A colossal siege engine, if you really had to do it, would then become gargantuan, huge, large, and then medium, as big as you. Objects changed by a shrink item spell can be returned to normal composition and size by hucking them on the ground. So when you get to the boss room or a room where you can set up or however it is you want to make the thing work, you drop the thing, on you go. Shrink item can also be made permanent, in which case you can alter its size an indefinite number of times, which is a great way to, walk your trebuchet through the front door of Baba Yaga's house. She's probably aware of it. Don't bring this to Baba Yaga. At very high level play, probably the most hilarious concept I've conceived of in recent memory, ring gates. Say maybe strap one to the front of your cannon and then strap the other one to the front of the barbarian's armor. 18 inches in diameter should be enough to fire a cannonball through. As long as you're on the same plane and within 100 miles of your new spotter friend, whatever goes through one comes out the other. So say something along the lines of telepathy or any of the myriad ways a diviner can see things, your arcane eyes, your scryings, your so on and so forth. You, from the comfort of your own wizard's tower, can fire very large projectiles at point blank range at some poor unfortunate bastard. There's a 100-pound weight limit each day, which means we could theoretically only do this so many times. The thing about high-level Pathfinder is you probably fall well within that limit. Rocket Tag is as Rocket Tag does, but if you were bougie as fuck and bought a single mithril cannonball, which would weigh half as much, and then it was being copied with abundant ammunition, double your pleasure, double the amount of enemies that are splattered to the wall because they were hit point blank by a cannonball. Good lord. However, I think the piece de resistance for the siege mage or any siege engineer with the money to do so, in fact, came to us from Ultimate Magic in the form of the animated object. Imagine you're a very powerful spellcaster who can fire very large rocks, spears, very magically, better than most people. You figured out how to do a copious amount of damage over a very long distance, but what happens if they get to your siege engine and you're not there, or you're knocked out, or some other shenanigans that prevent you from protecting the thing? Well, what if it could protect itself? With Craft Magic Arms and Armor, Craft Wondrous Item, and being a 5th level spellcaster, Craft Construct fits that bill quite nicely to turn the thing into an animated object, which is an entire deep dive all on its own. It becomes ridiculously customizable, adding slam attacks, giving your cannon the trample ability, giving it the ability to move on its own, takes the already very powerful weapon and turns it into a very powerful weapon that can defend itself, that has its own agency on the battlefield. Will it be as show-stopping as when you fire it? No, but it's strictly better than like a horde of giants running up, knocking you out because you fail to save versus a thing, and then the very expensive toy is dismantled. Now, where do we go from there? In terms of builds, there are a bunch of different ways, as I so often say, to skin this owlbear. So many that, again, it has to come down to its own special video. That video will have room within it to, crunch all of the numbers of all of the meta magic that we just talked about, and all of the damage that we can get up to, and all of the dumb stuff that we can jam on here to take as much advantage as possible of all of these advanced level 1-y shenanigans. But that's all the time I have for today. What do y'all think? Have we rolled up siege mages? Have we participated or repelled sieges in our games? Let me know about it down in the comments as always. Thank y'all so much for watching. We'll see you next time.